For a decade, I believed love was a ledger I had to keep balancing. I wired my parents money for every catastrophe, convinced I was keeping them from drowning. Then I saw the email where they called me their little pension plan, followed by a string of laughing emojis. I did the math that night. It wasn't just support. It was $384,000 of betrayal. And I was about to ask for a refund. If you looked at my life from the sidewalk, through the bay window of my apartment in Chicago, you would see a portrait of stability. I was 32 years old. I had a title that sounded important on LinkedIn, a senior project manager role that required me to be obsessively organized, and a fiancé named David who made his own sourdough starter and actually listened when I talked about my day. My credit score was perfect. My closet was color-coded. My voice, when I spoke in meetings, was measured and calm. The voice of a woman who never let a detail slip through the cracks. But inside that carefully curated existence, there was a leak, a slow, rhythmic draining of resources that I had convinced myself was normal. It happened on the third Friday of every month, like clockwork, and then again whenever the phone rang at an odd hour. I sat at my kitchen island, the blue light of my banking app illuminating my face. My thumb hovered over the transfer button. The amount was set to $1,200. The memo line simply read, "Family support." It was the same amount I paid for my share of the rent, but unlike rent, this payment bought me nothing but a temporary cessation of guilt. I pressed confirm. The screen flashed green. Sent. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. It was a physical release, a loosening of the knot in my chest that had been tightening since Monday. I told myself what I always told myself. I am a good daughter. I am lucky to have this job. They need me. They sacrificed for me. And now it is my turn to make sure they are okay. My phone buzzed on the granite counter. A text from my mother. Got it. Thanks, sweetie. You saved us this month. I stared at the words. Saved us. It was the hero narrative they had been writing for me since I was 22, freshly graduated and earning my first real paycheck. Back then. The requests had been small, a utility bill here, a grocery run there. But as my salary grew, so did the magnitude of their crises. The cost of their survival seemed to be pegged directly to my income bracket. I put the phone down and walked into the living room, where David was folding laundry. He looked up, smiling, but his eyes flickered to the phone in my hand and then back to my face. He knew. We didn't talk about it much anymore because every time we did, I ended up crying and defending them, and he ended up apologizing for not understanding the complexities of family loyalty. Everything is fine, I said, answering the question he hadn't asked. Just handling some bills. He nodded, snapping a towel. You know we need to put the deposit down for the venue next week, right? The transfer from your savings account should clear by Tuesday. I felt a cold spike in my stomach. I had moved money around to cover the family support transfer today. My savings were thinner than they should have been. I had mentally earmarked my upcoming quarterly bonus to replenish the wedding fund. But that wasn't here yet. Of course, I said, forcing my voice to remain light. It is all handled. It was a lie, but it was a manageable one. I was good at managing. I was the fixer. That was my role. My brother, Leo, was the dreamer, the artist, the one who needed protection from the harsh realities of the world. I was the sturdy one, the oak tree, the bank. I went to bed that night thinking about the pattern. It was hard to sleep when my mind was busy cataloging the last decade of emergencies. It felt less like a family history and more like a series of natural disasters that only struck one specific zip code in Ohio. I remembered the first big one. I was 24. I had just received a promotion, a significant bump in pay that I had foolishly shared with my parents over a celebratory dinner. 2 days later, my father called. His voice was tight, strained, the voice of a man at the end of his rope. It is the transmission. Claire, he had said, the mechanic says the whole thing is shot. $3,000. We just do not have it. I do not know how I am going to get to work on Monday. I remembered the panic I felt. If Dad couldn't work, they couldn't pay the mortgage. If they couldn't pay the mortgage, they would lose the house where I grew up, the house where Leo still lived in the basement, working on his music. It felt like a domino effect that would end in them living on the street. And it would be my fault because I had the money sitting in my account, earmarked for a trip to Italy I had been dreaming about for years. I sent the money. I canceled Italy. My mother had cried on the phone, telling me I was an angel, that I was the glue holding them together. Then there was the property tax issue 2 years later, $5,000. It came right after my Christmas bonus. Then the dental emergency, the furnace explosion, the unexpected medical deductible, the wind damage to the roof that insurance wouldn't cover. I rolled over, staring at the ceiling. The logic held up in the daylight, but in the dark, it felt thin. I told myself I was buying peace. I was preventing catastrophe. I was proving that I wasn't selfish. That word selfish was a weapon my mother kept in a velvet sheath. She rarely used it directly. She would just talk about how hard it was for people who didn't have children who cared. How lonely Mrs. Gable was down the street because her successful son never called, never helped, never looked back. I am not like that. I thought, I am good. The inciting incident, the crack in the hull, happened 3 weeks later. I was sitting at my desk at work, staring at a spreadsheet for a client, when my phone rang. It was my mother. It was 2 p.m. on a Tuesday. They knew I was at work, so a call meant urgency. "Hi, Mom," I said, stepping into the hallway. "Is everything okay?" "Oh, Claire, it is just a mess," she said, her voice breathless. "Your father is beside himself. It is the truck again, the axle. I do not understand the technical parts, but the man says it is dangerous to drive." My stomach tightened. How much, I asked. $1,800, she said. "And we are just tapped out. Honey, we had to pay for that blood work for me last week, and the grocery prices are just killing us. If we could just borrow it. We would pay you back as soon as the tax refund comes. They always said borrow. They never paid it back." I closed my eyes. I looked at the calendar on the wall. The wedding venue deposit had cleared, leaving my liquid savings dangerously low. I had enough for rent and bills, but $1,800 would put me into my emergency overdraft protection. "Mom," I said, my voice shaking slightly, "I can't do it right now. I just paid the venue deposit. I literally do not have the cash until the 1st of the month." There was a silence on the other end. It wasn't an empty silence. It was heavy, loaded with sudden temperature change. "You do not have it," she repeated. Her voice had lost the breathless, frantic quality. It was flat, cold. "I really don't." I said, "I am sorry." "Well," she said, "I suppose we will just have to park the truck and walk. I hope your father's back can handle the 3 miles to the bus stop. I just thought, considering how well you're doing, that family might come first. But I understand. You have your big party to pay for." The guilt hit me like a physical blow. The image of my 60-year-old father walking 3 miles in the cold because I wanted a specific reception hall was nauseating. "Mom, please, don't say it like that. I am not saying it like anything." "Claire," she said, her voice warming up again, pivoting back to the victim role. "We will figure it out. We always do. We do not want to be a burden. I just hope you know how much we love you, even when you can't help." She hung up. I stood in the hallway, clutching my phone. I felt dirty. I felt mean. I almost called her back to tell her I would put it on a credit card. But David's face flashed in my mind. He had been so proud of us for paying for the wedding in cash. I went back to my desk, but I couldn't focus. That night, I was quiet. David made pasta and poured me a glass of wine. "You seem off," he said. "Parents." I nodded. "They needed money for the truck." I said no. "Good," David said. He put his hand over mine. "Claire, that is good. You have boundaries. It feels terrible." I said, "It feels terrible because they have trained you to feel terrible," David said gently. He had a way of cutting to the bone without being cruel. "Think about it. Claire, in the 4 years we have been together, have you ever seen a bill? Have you ever seen a mechanic's invoice?" I pulled my hand away. I don't need to see invoices. David, they are my parents. They aren't running a scam. They are just bad with money. He held up his hands in surrender. I know. I am sorry. I just worry about you. You carry so much of their weight. I defended them for another 10 minutes, citing the recession, my father's bad luck with jobs, the cost of living in Ohio. But later, when I was brushing my teeth, looking at my reflection in the mirror, I felt a flush of embarrassment. My defense had sounded rehearsed. It sounded like a script I had been handed and told to memorize. They aren't running a scam. Why did I have to say that the following Sunday? We went to their house for dinner. It was a 2-hour drive, and we did it once a month. The house looked the same as always, cluttered. Warm, smelling of pot roast and stale cigarette smoke. My brother Leo was there, lying on the couch, playing a video game on his Switch. He waved at me without looking up. Hey, corporate sellout, he joked. Hey, basement dweller. I shot back, but there was no heat in it. We loved each other. Mostly. Dinner was tense. My father made a big show of rubbing his lower back, wincing every time he stood up to carve the roast. Bus walk getting to you? Frank, my mother asked, shooting a glance at me. It is fine. Linda, he said, playing the martyr. I have walked further in worse weather. We do what we have to do. I stared at my mashed potatoes. I wanted to scream. I wanted to open my banking app right there and transfer the money just to make them stop performing. After dinner, my father asked me to look at his tablet. I can't get into the email, he said. It keeps asking for a password change. You are the computer genius. Fix it for me. I took the iPad. It was an old model, the screen smeared with fingerprints. I sat at the kitchen table while they went into the living room to watch television with David and Leo. It was a simple fix. He had caps lock on. I reset the password and logged him in. The inbox flooded with unread messages, spam, political newsletters, phishing updates. I was about to hand it back when a notification popped up at the top of the screen. It was an email from a man named Jerry. I knew Jerry. He was Dad's old drinking buddy, a guy who moved to Florida 5 years ago to retire. The subject line read, R.E., the Vegas trip. I shouldn't have clicked it. I should have respected his privacy, but the word Vegas stuck in my brain. My parents hadn't been on a vacation in 10 years. They couldn't afford to fix their truck. I tapped the notification. The email opened. It was a chain. Jerry wrote, looks like a great lineup. The flight prices aren't bad if we book now. You guys in? My father's reply was below it. Sent 2 days ago, the same day I had told them I couldn't pay for the truck. Frank wrote, we are in. Just waiting on our little pension plan to clear the funds. She is playing hard to get this month because of the wedding, but she will cave. She always does. Worst case, we put it on the card, and she pays it off when she gets her bonus. There were 3 laughing emojis at the end of the sentence. Our little pension plan. I read it again. The words didn't make sense. It was like reading a foreign language. She will cave. She always does. I went numb. It wasn't anger. It was a complete cessation of feeling. I felt like I had been injected with Novocaine. The sounds of the television from the other room, the laugh track. My mother's cackle. David's polite chuckle sounded like they were coming from underwater. I scrolled up. Linda wrote, don't worry about the hotel. Jerry, we can upgrade to the suite. Claire got a raise last month, so we usually see a bump in the support check. I put the iPad down on the table. My hands were trembling, but not visibly. It was an internal vibration, a frequency that rattled my teeth. They weren't broke. They were negotiating upgrades. I looked at the kitchen, the peeling wallpaper, the linoleum that had been there since 1995. It was a set. It was a stage design. They kept it this way to show me how much they needed me. I stood up. I walked into the living room. My father looked up from his recliner. Fixed it, he asked. I nodded. Yeah, just a password issue. I didn't scream. I didn't flip the coffee table. I didn't confront them. I realized, with a terrifying clarity, that if I confronted them now, they would lie. They would say it was a joke. They would say I was snooping. They would turn it back on me. And because I was programmed to believe them, I might actually apologize. We need to go. I said to David, I have a headache, a migraine. David looked at me, saw the color of my face, which must have been sheet white, and stood up immediately. "We are heading out," he said. "Claire's not feeling well." My mother fussed, offering aspirin, offering leftovers, trying to touch my forehead. I recoiled from her hand. It took everything I had not to slap her. "Drive." I told David when we got into the car, "Just drive." I didn't tell him on the ride home. I couldn't speak. I just watched the highway markers flash by. Red and white, red and white. My mind was hyper-alert. I was replaying every conversation, every tearful plea for money, every emergency of the last decade, the transmission, the roof, the teeth, the tax. I had never seen a bill. Not once. I had offered to pay the mechanics directly. And my father had always said, "No, no, they don't take cards over the phone, or I already wrote them a check. Just reimburse me." I was an idiot. I was a project manager who managed million-dollar budgets for corporations, and I had been embezzled by my own parents for a decade. When we got home, David went to bed. He knew something was wrong, but he respected my silence. I waited until his breathing evened out. Then I got up, poured a glass of red wine, and opened my laptop at the dining table. I logged into my bank. I went to the search function. I typed in transfer. I started a spreadsheet. Column A date, column B amount, column C. The reason as best I could remember, column D, the lie. I started with last month, $1,200, Routine support, 2 weeks prior. $400. Mom's medication. I went back a year, then 2, then 5. The numbers blurred. I had to download the archived statements. I sat there for 4 hours, drinking wine that tasted like vinegar, typing until my fingers ached. The sun was starting to gray the sky outside when I summed the column. I stared at the cell at the bottom of the spreadsheet. $384,250. I blinked. I rubbed my eyes. I checked the formula. It was correct. $384,000. That was a house. That was a retirement fund. That was the freedom to quit the job I sometimes hated. That was my life, dissolved into their emergencies. But I wasn't done. I opened Instagram. I opened Facebook. I had my parents blocked on some things, but not everything. I looked at the dates of the big transfers. June 12th, 2018. Transfer $5,000. Emergency plumbing repair. June 15th, 2018. My mother's Facebook post. Just the two of us, romantic getaway photo of them on a boat. I had assumed it was a local ferry. Looking at the background now, I saw the blue water of the Caribbean. August 4th, 2021. Transfer $3,000. Dad's back surgery copay. August 10th, 2021. My brother's Instagram. A photo of a new guitar amp. Thanks to the rents for the early birthday gift. They hadn't just stolen from me. They had used my money to spoil Leo. They had used my money to play the benevolent, wealthy parents to him, while telling me they were starving. They made me the cash cow so they could be the heroes. I closed the laptop. I sat in the silence of the apartment. The rage was there. Yes, it was a hot, molten thing in my gut. But underneath the rage was something else. Grief. I grieved for the parents I thought I had. The ones who were struggling but honest. The ones who loved me but were just unlucky. Those people didn't exist. They were characters played by grifters who happened to share my DNA. My phone rang. It was 7 a.m. It was my father. I stared at the screen. Dad calling. I picked it up. "Hello." My voice was raspy. "Claire, listen," he said. He didn't say hello. He launched right in. The mechanic called back. He said he can do a temporary fix on the axle for $800. We can make that work. I think, but we need it by noon or he's going to charge us a storage fee for the weekend. The urgency, the detail about the storage fee to add pressure, the specific time constraint. It was a masterclass. And I heard it. For the first time, I really heard it. Beneath the panic, beneath the stress. There was a tone of absolute confidence. He wasn't asking. He was notifying me of a transaction. He knew I would pay. He knew that even if I said no yesterday, I had spent the night stewing in guilt, and I would break this morning. He was betting on my love. I looked at the black screen of my laptop where the spreadsheet was hidden. Claire. Are you there? I am here, I said. So, can you do the 800 I hate to ask? You know that? I took a breath. The air in the room felt different, sharper. I will get back to you, I said. There was a pause. He wasn't expecting that. He was expecting a sigh and a Zelle notification. What he asked. He needs to know by noon. Claire, I heard you. I said I will get back to you. I hung up the phone. I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I looked at the dark window where my reflection stared back at me. She looked the same as she had yesterday, 32. Stable, organized. But she wasn't. She was dangerous. I walked to the kitchen and made a pot of coffee. I had a lot of work to do. The weekend that followed was not a weekend. It was an excavation. I told David I had a massive project due for a client in London, a lie that bought me the privacy of the guest room and 48 hours of silence. I shut the door, brewed a pot of black coffee strong enough to strip paint, and opened the spreadsheet. My life, previously defined by milestones and memories, was now reduced to data points. I created categories. Column E became the classification zone: medical, housing, legal, education, repairs, utilities. I started searching through my text history, scrolling back years. My thumb cramped as I swiped up, watching the dialogue of my life rewind. It was a graveyard of manufactured crises. March 3rd, 2019, Mom needs an MRI. Insurance won't cover the copay until the deductible is met. It is $600. Honey, October 12th, 2020. The furnace motor blew. Dad is freezing. The part is $1,200. July 8th, 2022. Legal fees for the property dispute with the neighbor, $800. I cross-referenced every text with a bank transfer. The match rate was 100%. Every time they asked, I sent. The lag time between the request and the transaction was usually less than an hour. I had been a perfect vending machine press the guilt button, dispense cash, but the numbers were just the skeleton. I needed the flesh. I needed to know if the monsters were real or just shadows on the wall. On Monday morning, I took a sick day. I had never taken a sick day when I wasn't actually running a fever. But my moral compass was recalibrating. I sat at my kitchen table with my phone and a notepad. I started with the car. Miller Automotive was the shop my father had sworn by for 20 years. He spoke of the owner, a man named Jim, like a family member. Jim says the brakes are shot. Jim says the transmission is slipping. I dialed the number. My heart was hammering against my ribs. A frantic, bird-like rhythm. Miller Automotive. This is Sarah. Hi, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I am calling about a service history for a vehicle, a 2018 Ford F-150. Owner's name is Frank Bennett. 1 second, she said. I heard the clicking of a keyboard. Okay, I have it. What are you looking for? I am his daughter. I said, I am helping him organize his taxes. He mentioned a transmission repair back in January, a complete rebuild. He said it was around $3,000. I just need a copy of that invoice. There was a pause. The typing stopped. January. Sarah asked, I'm looking at the log here. We did an oil change in January and a tire rotation. No transmission work, I asked. Honey, this truck has 40,000 miles on it, she said. If the transmission needed a rebuild, it would be under warranty. We wouldn't charge him a dime. The room seemed to tilt. Of course. The warranty. I knew that. Why hadn't I remembered that? Because when my father called. Panic override logic. Are you sure? I asked. Maybe he paid cash. We log everything, cash or credit, she said. The last major work we did was a brake pad replacement 2 years ago. That was $400. Thank you, I whispered. I hung up. I wrote lie in red ink next to the entry for January 14th. Then I wrote lie next to the entry for the transmission fluid flush from last year and the suspension realignment from the year before. I spent the next 3 hours making calls. I called the dental clinic where my mother supposedly had 2 crowns put in last summer. The receptionist was confused. Mrs. Bennett came in for a cleaning in July, but she declined the x-rays. There is no record of crown work. I called the county clerk's office regarding the property tax shortfall from 2023. The taxes on that parcel were paid in full by the mortgage escrow account. Ma'am, there was no supplemental bill. I called the vet. The dog, a golden retriever named Buster, who I adored, supposedly needed a surgery for a bowel obstruction 6 months ago. The vet tech was cheerful. Buster, oh, he is healthy as a horse. We haven't seen him since his rabies shot. I put the phone down. I felt sick. Not metaphorically. I physically gagged. It wasn't just that they were taking money. It was the specificity of the lies. They had invented pain for the dog. They had invented toothaches. They had invented mechanical failures. They had looked at their lives, found them too boring or too solvent to justify a handout, and decided to sprinkle tragedy over the top like seasoning. I went to the bathroom and splashed cold water on my face. I looked at myself in the mirror. You are smart, I told my reflection. You manage million-dollar accounts. You negotiate contracts. So how were you this stupid? The shame was a heavy, wet blanket. It was heavier than the anger. I felt like a mark, a fool. I imagined them sitting at their kitchen table, laughing as the notification popped up on their phones. There she goes again, Pavlov's daughter. I practiced what I would say to them. I stood in front of the mirror, my hands gripping the porcelain sink. Dad, I called the mechanic. I know you lied. No, too aggressive. He would deny it. He would say, I called the wrong shop. Mom, why did you say you needed crowns when you didn't? She would cry. She would say I was confusing the dates. She would say she went to a different dentist for a second opinion and forgot to tell me. I swallowed the words. I choked them down because, God help me, a part of me still wanted it to be a mistake. A part of me wanted there to be a second set of books. A secret explanation where they were actually in trouble and I was actually helping. I wanted to be the hero, not the victim. Tuesday night. I went digging in my old filing cabinet. I was looking for my birth certificate, but I found something else. It was a manila envelope labeled Family Documents. Inside was a single sheet of paper, typed in Times New Roman, dated 5 years ago. The Bennett Family Support Agreement. I remembered signing it. I was 27. My father had sat me down with a serious look on his face. Claire, he had said, we want to treat you like an adult. We want to be transparent about the household budget, since you are doing so well. And we are on a fixed income. We think it is fair to formalize your contribution. It helps us plan. I had felt proud. I felt like a partner in the family enterprise. I read the document now. Clause 4. The daughter agrees to provide supplemental assistance for unforeseen household variance up to 15% of her monthly net income. Clause 7. This agreement reflects the mutual understanding of familial duty and debt repayment for childhood expenses. I stared at Clause 7. Debt repayment for childhood expenses. It was nonsense. Legal gibberish. It was a lease agreement for a child who had already moved out. But looking at it now, I saw the psychological architecture. They had framed it as a contract to make me feel legally bound to their whims. They had used the language of business to hide the nature of the theft. I needed professional eyes on this. I made an appointment with a lawyer named Sarah Vance. She was a family law specialist, but she did estate planning and civil litigation too. I didn't tell David. I paid the consultation fee from a credit card I kept for work expenses. Sarah's office was sleek, smelling of leather and expensive coffee. She listened to me for 20 minutes without interrupting. I showed her the spreadsheet. I showed her the support agreement. When I finished, she took off her glasses and rubbed the bridge of her nose. Claire, she said. Her voice was kind but firm. This isn't a legal contract. This is a prop. I know. I said. But can I get the money back? Can I sue them for fraud? She leaned back in her chair. Technically, maybe. You have evidence of deception. If they said the money was for a specific purpose like a surgery, and they used it for a vacation, that is theft by deception. But civil suits against parents are messy, they are expensive, and usually, the money is gone. Do they have $300,000 sitting in an account? I doubted it. They spent money as fast as I sent it. Probably not. I said, then a lawsuit might just be a very expensive way to prove you are right. She said, but there is something else here. She tapped the spreadsheet. You said you found a credit inquiry. I hadn't mentioned that yet. But I had seen it on my report that morning. A soft pull from a mortgage lender. Yes, I said. I froze my credit immediately. Good, she said. But you need to find out why. If they are using your payment history to qualify for a loan, they might be listing you as a contributor to the household income, or worse. They might have listed you as a co-borrower without your signature. Is that possible? With digital signing? Sarah grimaced. It is easier than you think. But here's the most important thing. Claire, the legal system can help you protect your assets, but it cannot fix the relationship. If you stop paying, they will escalate. This isn't just about money to them. It is about control. You are their retirement plan, their emergency fund, and their ego boost all wrapped in one. When you pull the plug, they are going to panic. I nodded. I knew she was right. So what do? You document, she said. You keep this spreadsheet. You save every text, and you send a certified letter stating that you are not financially responsible for them. We can draft it. It is a cease and desist for your wallet. I walked out of her office feeling lighter, but also terrified. I had a strategy, but a strategy meant war. The first of the month arrived on a Thursday. Usually, I sent the transfer at 6 in the morning. By 8, my mother would text me a row of heart emojis. 6 o'clock came. I stared at my phone. I didn't open the banking app. I went to the gym. 7 o'clock, I made a smoothie. 8 o'clock, my phone buzzed. A text from Mom. Good morning, sweetie. Hope you have a great day at work. It was a prompt, a gentle nudge. Did you forget I didn't reply? 9 o'clock. Dad is asking if the transfer went through. He is trying to pay the electric bill and he is worried it might bounce. I typed a reply, then deleted it. I typed another one. No transfer today. Too blunt. I put the phone down. I needed to see what happened when I did nothing. By noon. The tone had shifted. Claire, is everything okay? We are getting a little worried here. By 3, the guilt started. Your father is stressing out. Claire, you know his blood pressure can't take this. Please just let us know if there is a glitch with the bank. By 5, the group text started. My brother Leo was added to the chat. Leo. Mom says you guys are locked out of the bank account. Everything good. My parents were triangulating. They were recruiting soldiers. At 6, my father called. I let it go to voicemail. He left a message. His voice was ragged, pitched perfectly between anger and despair. Claire, I don't know what is going on, but we are in a bad spot. The mortgage is due tomorrow. If we don't pay it, they are going to start foreclosure proceedings. I didn't want to tell you, but we are that close to the edge. Please, honey, call me. Foreclosure. The nuclear option. I sat on my couch. Listening to the voicemail, my heart was racing. Foreclosure. Could they really be that far behind if I didn't pay? Would they actually lose the house? I checked the county records online. The property taxes were paid. There was no notice of default filed. He was lying, again, but the doubt was a persistent worm. What if he isn't? What if this is the one time it is real? I couldn't just sit there. I needed to see it. I needed to look them in the eye. I told David I had to run an errand for work. I got in my car and drove the 2 hours to Ohio. I didn't call first. I wanted the element of surprise. I wanted to catch them in their despair. I expected to see boxes packed. I expected to see the lights off to save electricity. I expected to see them eating canned soup by candlelight. I pulled into the driveway at 8:30 at night. The house was blazing with light. The blue flicker of the giant television in the living room was visible through the sheer curtains. There was a delivery van pulling away as I parked. A white van with a logo I recognized, Williams-Sonoma. I sat in my car for a moment, watching. I got out and walked to the front door. I didn't knock. I used my key. I walked in. The smell hit me first. Not anxiety, not poverty. It smelled of expensive vanilla candles and roasting meat. Mom. Dad. They were in the living room. They jumped when they saw me. My father was in his recliner, a glass of amber liquid in his hand, not the cheap beer he claimed to drink, but something that looked like aged scotch. My mother was unwrapping a box on the coffee table. Claire, my mother, shrieked. She threw a throw blanket over the box. But she wasn't fast enough. I saw the gleam of stainless steel, an espresso machine, a Breville, the one that cost $800. "What are you doing here?" my father asked. Sitting up. He looked flushed, healthy. He didn't look like a man facing foreclosure. "I came to bring the check." I lied. My voice was calm, terrifyingly calm. "I thought you said the bank was foreclosing tomorrow. I wanted to make sure it got here in time." My father blinked. He exchanged a quick, panicked glance with my mother. "Oh, honey, you didn't have to drive all the way down here," my mother said, standing up and rushing to hug me. I went stiff in her arms. We figured it out. Your father moved some things around. We borrowed from Peter to pay Paul. You know?" She laughed, a nervous, high-pitched tinkle. "Move things around?" I asked, pulling away. "You said you were losing the house. You said you were on the edge." It felt like the edge. My father boomed, trying to regain control of the room. He stood up, using his height to intimidate me. "When the bills pile up, it feels like the end of the world. You know how I get with stress." I looked at the coffee table. I walked over and pulled the blanket off the box. The Breville Barista Express. "Is this for the foreclosure?" I asked. "Does the bank accept espresso makers as currency now?" My mother's face went tight. "That was a gift," she snapped. "From Jerry. He sent it to us." "Jerry," I said. "The guy who went to Vegas with you, the guy you were joking with about your pension plan." The room went dead silent. My mother's eyes widened. My father froze. I saw the email. "Dad," I said, on the iPad. "Our little pension plan." "She will cave. She always does." My father laughed. It was a forced, hollow sound. "Claire, that was a joke. Just locker room talk. You know how Jerry is. He has a crude sense of humor. I was just playing along." "Playing along," I repeated. "So the $384,000 I've sent you over the last 10 years, that was a joke too." Whoa, my father said, raising his hands. "Where are you getting numbers like that? 300,000. You are imagining things. Claire, you help out." "Sure, and we appreciate it, but let's not get crazy with the math." He was rewriting reality, right in front of me. He was looking me in the eye and telling me that the sky was green. "And you know," my mother interjected, her voice dropping to a solicitous whisper, "you have been under a lot of stress lately. With the wedding and that job, maybe you are just projecting. We worry about you. Claire, you seem so high-strung lately." I stared at her. It was a masterpiece of gaslighting. In 3 sentences, she had transformed me from the victim into the unstable, hysterical daughter who needed their pity. I looked around the room. I saw the new curtains. I saw the golf clubs in the corner that I hadn't noticed before Callaway's. Expensive. I didn't say anything. I couldn't argue with them. If I argued, they would drag me into the mud and beat me with experience. "I need to go," I said. "Claire, don't be like this," my mother said, reaching for my arm. "Stay for dinner. We have steaks." Steaks. The people facing foreclosure had steaks. "No," I said. "I really don't." I turned to the door. As I reached for the handle, my mother said something that stopped me cold. "Well, if you are going to be like this, just make sure you transfer the funds by tomorrow. We know you have it. We saw the bonus hit your account yesterday." I stopped. I didn't turn around. My bonus. My quarterly performance bonus had hit my account yesterday morning. I hadn't told David. I hadn't told anyone. It was a direct deposit into my personal checking account. "How did you know about the bonus?" I asked, speaking to the door. My mother faltered. Her mistake hung in the air, vibrating. Well, you mentioned it. Last week. You said you were getting a bonus. I didn't. I said, I haven't spoken to you in a week, and I never told you the date. I turned around slowly. You are in my account. I said, don't be ridiculous. My father spat. He was angry now. The mask of the lovable. Bumbling dad had slipped. We are your parents. We don't spy on you. But I saw the look on my mother's face. It wasn't anger. It was fear. She looked like a child caught with her hand in the jar. They knew my passwords, or maybe years ago, when I helped them set up their online banking. I had linked my account to theirs for emergency transfers and never unlinked it. They could see my balance. They could see my deposits. That was how they knew. That was why the emergencies always timed perfectly with my pay bumps. They weren't psychic. They were monitoring me. I wasn't a person to them. I was a ticker symbol. I looked at them one last time. They stood there in their renovated living room, surrounded by the spoils of my labor, looking at me not with love, but with calculation. They were trying to figure out which lever to pull next. Anger, tears. Guilt. I didn't give them the chance. I opened the door and walked out into the cool night air. Claire. Come back here, my father yelled from the porch. Don't you walk away from your family. I got into my car. My hands were shaking so hard, I could barely key the ignition. I locked the doors. I drove away. I didn't cry on the drive home. The tears were gone. In their place was something cold and hard, like a stone forming in my chest. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't poor money management. It wasn't a cultural difference. It was a long con. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't the mark. I was the opposition. I reached for my phone and dialed Sarah, the lawyer. It was late, but I knew I could leave a message. Sarah. I said when the beep sounded, "It is Claire Bennett. You were right. They are monitoring the accounts. We need to draft that letter, and I need to know how to change my social security number." I hung up. I watched the road stretch out before me, illuminated by my headlights. I was driving back to Chicago, back to David, back to my life. I was done paying. Now, I was going to collect. The drive back to Chicago was a blur of highway lights and adrenaline. But when I walked into my apartment, the silence was absolute. David was asleep. The air smelled of the lavender fabric softener he used, a scent that usually calmed me, but now felt like a reminder of the domestic peace I had been buying at a premium. I did not sleep that night. I sat at the dining table, the laptop screen glowing like a campfire in a dark wood. I had the raw data of the money leaving my account, but now I needed to map where it landed. I needed to understand the ecosystem of the grift. I started looking for patterns, overlaying my transfer dates with the digital footprints of my family. It was forensic accounting performed on Instagram and Facebook. June 4th, 2 years ago, I transferred $2,500 for emergency roof patch. June 6th, 2 years ago, my aunt posted a photo of my mother at a casino in Indiana. The caption read, "Linda winning big on the slots, or maybe just spending big, love our girls' weekends." September 1st, last year, I sent $1,200 for overdue heating bill. September 3rd, last year, my brother, Leo, posted a story on Instagram, a new drum kit, Pearl Export Series. I looked up the price, $1,100. The correlation was impossible to ignore. My money was not going into a black hole of debt. It was being laundered into lifestyle upgrades. But the most damning pattern wasn't the casinos or the vacations. It was Leo. Leo was 29. He was the golden child, the artist, the one whose potential was so fragile it had to be protected from the harsh winds of reality. I had always been told that Leo was struggling, that he was barely making rent, that he was working 3 jobs just to keep his lights on. I pulled up his Venmo history, which was public because he never changed his privacy settings. I saw transactions from my parents, frequent ones, rent help, groceries, car insurance. The dates aligned perfectly. I would send my parents $1,500 for a medical crisis, and 2 days later, they would send Leo $1,500 for rent. They weren't just stealing from me to fund themselves. They were stealing from me to fund him. I was the engine that kept the golden child afloat. While they took the credit for being the benevolent saviors, I needed to see him. I texted Leo the next morning. I am in the city. Meet me for coffee. Need to ask you something about Mom and Dad. He replied instantly. Sure. Free at 2. We met at a coffee shop in Wicker Park. He looked good, relaxed. He was wearing a leather jacket that looked vintage but smelled new. He hugged me, and for a second, I felt the old instinct to protect him, to ask him how his band was doing, to slip him a 20. I killed that instinct cold. Hey, corporate mogul, he said, grinning as he sat down with his oat milk latte. To what do I owe the pleasure I didn't smile back? I took a sip of my black coffee. I need to ask you about your rent. Leo, his smile faltered. My rent. What about it? How much do Mom and Dad help you with? He shifted in his seat, looking at the exposed brick wall. I don't know. A little bit here and there. Why, you know things are tight for artists. Claire, we don't all have the big salary. I know things are tight. I said, that is why I've been sending Mom and Dad money every month for 10 years, because they told me they were drowning. But looking at the numbers, it looks like they were just passing the bucket to you. Leo frowned. He put his cup down. Wait, he said. You send them money. $384,000 over 10 years. I said. The number hung in the air between us, heavy and gross. Leo's eyes widened. He actually laughed. A nervous, disbelief-filled sound. No way. That is insane. Claire, they tell me they help you. My stomach dropped. What did you say? They tell me they help you, he repeated. Mom is always saying, oh, we have to send Claire a little something for the wedding, or Claire is stressed about her mortgage, so we are going to cover the car insurance this month. I stared at him. The room seemed to tilt. They told you they were sending me money. Yeah, Leo said. He looked confused now. That is why I never felt bad about taking the rent checks. I figured if they had enough to help you the rich one, then they definitely had enough to help me. I thought they were loaded. Claire, like secret retirement account loaded. I felt a wave of nausea so strong I had to grip the edge of the table. It was a double blind. They played us against each other. To me, they were destitute, and I was the savior. To him, they were wealthy and generous, and I was the needy, high-maintenance daughter who still took handouts. They lied to both of us. Leo, I said, my voice trembling. They took my money, told me it was for surgery or taxes, and then gave it to you to be the heroes. Leo sat back. He looked at his hands. I didn't know. He said quietly, I swear to God. Claire, I thought you knew. I thought maybe you were sending it to them to give to me, like a tax write-off or something. A tax write-off, I asked. Why would I do that? I don't know, he snapped. Defensive now. You are the one with the finance job. I just thought you wanted to help. I thought you wanted to help. The phrase cut me open. It exposed the entire architecture of the con. They had framed my exploitation as charity. Even if the truth came out, they had preloaded the defense. Claire is just helping the family. Why is she so angry about helping her brother? I looked at Leo. He wasn't the villain. Not really. He was just a parasite who didn't know he was feeding on his sister's blood. But he was complicit. He had taken the money. He had never asked questions because the answers might have required him to get a real job. I am cutting them off. Leo, I said, completely. And that means the money train stops for you, too. If you can't pay your rent next month, don't call them. They won't have it. Leo looked panic-stricken. Claire, wait. You can't just stop. I have a gig coming up, but it doesn't pay until next month. Welcome to the real world, I said. I stood up. I didn't pay for his coffee. I walked out of the coffee shop and walked for 3 miles. I walked until the blisters on my heels burst. I needed the physical pain to distract me from the emotional crash that was happening in my chest. I grieved. I grieved for the trip to Italy I canceled when I was 24. I grieved for the apartment with the balcony I didn't rent because it was $200 more a month, the exact amount my father needed for his heart medication that year. I grieved for the nights I laid awake staring at the ceiling, terrified that my parents would be homeless, carrying the weight of their survival on my chest like a concrete block. I grieved for the pride I felt when they called me a good daughter. It wasn't pride. It was the feeling of a dog getting a treat for performing a trick. By the time I got home, the grief had hardened. It had cooled into something sharp and useful. I was done crying. I was going to build a case. I turned my guest room into a war room. I bought a printer. I bought binders. I printed every bank statement from the last 10 years. I printed every email. I used software to download my entire text history with both of them. I created the proof package. Binder 1. The timeline of requests versus the timeline of reality. Binder 2. The inconsistencies, the conflicting stories, the lies about health. Binder 3. The household support agreement and the evidence of coercion. I spent 3 nights annotating the texts. I used a highlighter to mark the emotional triggers: yellow for guilt, pink for medical lies, green for love bombing. The pages looked like a rainbow of manipulation. Then, I found the voice note. I was going through my cloud backup, looking for a specific voicemail from my mother about a broken furnace to match a transfer date. I found a file simply labeled Dad, 2021. I clicked play. It was a voicemail. I remembered it. He had called to ask for money for a lawyer, something about a property line dispute that turned out to be fake. In the recording, he left a long, rambling message about how stressed he was. Claire, please, I don't know where else to turn. Then, a click. He must have thought he hung up, but the line stayed open. There was a rustling sound. Then, a car door slamming. The sound of an engine starting. Then, my father's voice, clear as a bell, but different. The wine was gone. The stress was gone. Yeah, I left it, he said. He was talking to someone else in the car. My mother. She will send it. She is a nervous wreck about the legal trouble. My mother's voice, laughing. God, she is so easy. Did you tell her it was urgent? I told her the sheriff was coming, he said, chuckling. That usually gets the checkbook open. Hey, are we stopping at the Breathless Resort or the casino first? Casino. She said, I feel lucky. The recording ended. I sat in my chair, the headphones pressing against my ears. I played it again. She is so easy. That usually gets the checkbook open. It wasn't just theft. It was sport. They enjoyed it. They mocked me for my concern. They laughed at my anxiety. I saved the file. I named it Exhibit A. Now, I was ready to fire the warning shot. I didn't want to scream at them. I wanted to terrify them with bureaucracy. I wanted to speak the language they hated most: accountability. I drafted an email. To Frank Bennett. Linda Bennett. From Claire Bennett. Subject: Financial documentation required for IRS audit/financial planning. Dear Mom and Dad, as I prepare for my upcoming marriage and long-term financial planning, my accountant has advised me to conduct a full review of my past 10 years of expenditures. As you know, I have transferred a total of $384,250 to you during this period. In order to properly categorize these transactions for potential tax implications and gift reporting, I need you to provide documentation for the following emergency expenses you requested funding for. 1. Transmission rebuild. January 14, 2018. Invoice required. 2. Emergency dental surgery. July 12, 2019. Billing statement required. 3. Property tax. Lien settlement. March 3, 2021. Receipt from county clerk required. 4. Legal defense fund, October 10, 2021. Retainer agreement required. Please provide these documents by Friday at 5 p.m. If documentation cannot be provided, please confirm in writing that these requests were not for the stated purpose. This is a time-sensitive financial matter. Future support is paused until this audit is complete. Regards, Claire. I hit send. I set a timer. It took 11 minutes. My phone rang. It was my mother. I didn't answer. Then my father. I didn't answer. Then a text. Mom Claire. What is this? An audit? Are you in trouble? I didn't reply. Dad, this is ridiculous. Who keeps receipts from 5 years ago? You are acting like the IRS. We are family. I waited. The tone shifted. Just as I predicted. Mom Claire? Honey, please pick up. We are scared. Why are you doing this? We used the money to survive. We did everything for you growing up. We sacrificed so much. Love bombing. Dad, I can't believe you are treating us like employees. After all we have been through, you know my heart can't take this stress. Do you want to put me in the hospital victimhood? And then, the threat. It came an hour later, when they realized I wasn't picking up. Mom, I would hate for people to think you are being cruel to your aging parents. Claire, people talk. I would hate for David's family to hear that you are cutting us off over paperwork. We just want to protect your reputation. There it was, the velvet-covered dagger. Pay us, or we will destroy your image. I took a screenshot of the text. I added it to the binder. By the next day, the flying monkeys had been deployed. My phone rang at work. It was my Aunt Karen, my mother's sister. Claire, she said, her voice dripping with concern. I just got off the phone with your mother. She sounded devastated. Is everything okay? She said you are. Withholding help. She said you are going through some kind of mental break. They had spun the narrative. I wasn't the victim of theft. I was the unstable daughter having a breakdown, lashing out at her poor, saintly parents. I am fine, Aunt Karen, I said, keeping my voice level. I'm just asking for receipts for the $300,000 I gave them. Did they mention that part? There was a silence on the line. 300,000, Karen asked. She said it was a few grocery runs. Ask them about the casino trip. Karen, I said, ask them about the breathless resort. I hung up. I wasn't going to litigate this family member by family member. I was going to lose the gossip war, and I had to accept that. They had a 30-year head start on the narrative. I needed one more professional opinion. I needed to quantify the damage. I met with Mark, a financial planner recommended by a colleague. He was an older man with kind eyes and a calculator that looked like it belonged in a cockpit. I laid out the spreadsheet. I didn't give him the emotional story. I just gave him the numbers. If I had invested this money, I said, instead of giving it to them, if I had put it in a standard SP 500 index fund, what would I have today? Mark punched the keys. He frowned. He punched them again. He looked up at me over his glasses. You want the conservative estimate or the aggressive one? The realistic one. I said, based on the market performance over the last 10 years, compounding annually. Mark looked at the screen. You are looking at roughly $650,000, maybe closer to $700, depending on the exact timing of the deposits. $700,000. The breath left my body. It wasn't just a house. It was freedom. It was the ability to retire 10 years early. It was the security of knowing that if I lost my job, I would be fine for a decade. They hadn't just taken my past earnings. They had stolen my future time. They had stolen years of my life that I would now have to work to make up. I thanked Mark. I walked out of his office into the bustle of downtown Chicago. The wind whipped off the lake, cold and biting. I felt a clarity that was sharper than the cold. I couldn't fix this with an email. I couldn't fix this with a private conversation. If I met them privately, they would gaslight me. They would cry. They would claim ignorance. They would wear me down because they knew where all my buttons were. They had installed them. I needed witnesses. I needed a venue where they couldn't make a scene without humiliating themselves. I needed a place where documents could be laid on a table and not ignored. I looked at my calendar. My birthday was in 2 weeks. Usually, I went home to Ohio for a family dinner where I ended up paying for the groceries and cooking the meal. This year would be different. I pulled out my phone and called a restaurant in their town, an upscale steakhouse they loved but could never afford or claimed they couldn't. I won't have to, David said. I have seen the spreadsheet. Claire, if you waver, I will read it out loud. I hung up. I looked at the city skyline, steel and glass rising against the gray sky. I was ready. The restaurant was called the Ironwood. It was the kind of place my parents viewed as a status symbol: dark wood paneling, white tablecloths, thick enough to sleep on, and a menu where the steaks didn't have prices listed next to them. It was neutral ground. But it was also a stage. I had reserved the private dining room in the back, a space usually used for corporate mergers or retirement parties. I arrived 20 minutes early. David was with me, wearing a suit that made him look like a lawyer, which was intentional. I walked around the table. There were 5 place settings. At the head of the table, my seat. To my right, David. To my left, Leo. Across from me, my parents. I reached into my bag and pulled out 2 manila envelopes. They were thick. Inside each one was a copy of the spreadsheet, the timeline of lies, the transcript of the voice note, and a formal letter stating that all financial support was permanently terminated. I placed one envelope on my father's plate. I placed the other on my mother's. I sat down. My hands were folded on the table, resting on the cold linen. They weren't shaking. David put his hand over mine. "Remember the rules," he said softly. I nodded. I recited them like a prayer. No yelling, no pleading, no debating feelings, facts only. If they cry, I offer a tissue, not a check. If they scream, I lower my voice. The calm is the hook. I whispered. David squeezed my hand. "You are ready." At 6 o'clock exactly. The heavy oak door opened. My mother walked in first. She was wearing a new dress, something floral and expensive looking that I had probably paid for via a medical emergency 3 months ago. She had a gift bag in her hand. Her face was arranged in a mask of aggressive delight. "Happy birthday, baby," she squealed, coming toward me with her arms wide. My father followed, looking dapper in a blazer. He was smiling, but it didn't reach his eyes. His gaze flicked immediately to the envelopes on the plates, and I saw a micro-expression of tightness around his mouth. He knew, or he suspected. The ambush at their house had spooked them, and the silence from me over the last 2 weeks had terrified them. I stood up, but I didn't step forward into the hug. I stayed behind my chair. "Hello, Mom. Hello, Dad." My mother faltered, her arms dropping. She looked at the lack of physical contact like it was a slap. "Oh," she said, her voice dropping an octave. "We are being formal today." "Okay." She sat down. My father took the seat next to her. He picked up the envelope, weighed it in his hand, and then set it back down. He didn't open it. He stared at me. "Where is your brother?" he asked. "He is parking," I said. Leo burst in a moment later, breathless, carrying a guitar case that he propped in the corner. He looked between us, the frozen tableau of parents and daughter, and his smile withered. "Hey guys," he said. "Happy birthday. Claire, this place is fancy. Are we celebrating or is someone getting indicted?" He laughed nervously. Nobody joined him. "Sit down." "Leo," I said gently. Leo sat. The waiter came in to take drink orders. I ordered an iced tea. My father ordered a scotch. "Double?" My mother asked for white wine. When the waiter left and the heavy door clicked shut, the silence in the room sucked the air out of my lungs. My mother reached for the gift bag. "Well, before we order, we have a little something for the birthday girl." "Mom." "Stop," I said. My voice was low, even, and projected clearly to the back of the room. "We are not doing gifts. We are not doing small talk." My father sighed. A loud, theatrical exhalation. "Here we go. I knew it. I told you. Linda. She is still on this kick. Look, Claire, if this is about the other night, we are sorry we didn't tell you about the espresso machine. We should have been more upfront. But ruining your own birthday dinner to lecture us? It is a little dramatic, don't you think?" "It isn't a lecture?" I said. "Open the envelopes." My mother looked at the manila packet like it was a bomb. "I don't want to open this. Claire, I just want to have a nice dinner with my family. Can't we just be a family for one night?" "Open them," I said. Leo looked at me, then at the envelopes. "Claire, what is in there?" "The truth." "Leo," I said. My father snatched his envelope up and ripped the flap open. He pulled out the stack of papers. The spreadsheet was on top. The total sum of $384,000 highlighted in yellow. He stared at it. His face turned a mottled red. "This is insulting." He spat. He threw the papers onto the table. "You made a dossier. On your own parents." I watched him. I didn't flinch. I made an accounting. I said, "That spreadsheet details every dollar I have sent you for the last 10 years. It also details the reason you gave for needing it, and the reality of where it went." My mother opened hers slowly. She flipped through the pages. She stopped at the page with the casino photos next to the roof repair transfer. Her hand went to her throat. "You have been stalking us," she whispered. "This is sick. Claire, this is obsessive." I verified the information. I said, "I called Miller Automotive. I called the dental clinic. I called the county clerk. None of the emergencies were real." My father slammed his hand on the table. The silverware rattled. "So what?" he roared. "So what if we fudged the details? We needed the money. We are your parents. We raised you. We paid for your piano lessons. We paid for your braces. And now you are counting pennies. You are billing us for raising you." I waited for the echo of his shout to die down. "I am not billing you." I said, "I am stopping the payments." The sentence hung there. Simple. Absolute. My father's eyes narrowed. Then, he did exactly what I expected. He grabbed his chest. He winced. A sharp intake of breath. He slumped forward in his chair, his hand clawing at the lapel of his blazer. "Frank," my mother screamed. She stood up, knocking her chair back. "Frank." "Is it your heart?" my father groaned. I can't breathe. It is tight. "Linda, I need to go." Leo jumped up. "Dad." "Oh my God. Claire, he is having a heart attack." The performance was impressive. If I hadn't spent the last 2 weeks analyzing their patterns, I might have been dialing 911 in a panic. But I saw the glance he shot my mother right before he slumped. It was a cue. I didn't stand up. I didn't rush to his side. "David," I said calmly, "call 911. Tell them we have a male, 62, possible cardiac arrest at the Ironwood." David pulled out his phone immediately. "On it." My father's groaning stopped for a split second. I don't need an ambulance," he wheezed. "I just need to get home. I need my pills. Linda, take me to the car." "No." "Dad," I said. I sat perfectly still. My hands folded. "If it is a heart attack, moving you could be fatal. We stay right here until the paramedics arrive. They will be here in 4 minutes." David held the phone up, his thumb over the call button. "Dialing now," he said. My father looked at David. He looked at me. He saw the lack of panic. He saw that we were calling his bluff with a literal ambulance. "If the paramedics come, they will take you to Mercy Hospital." I continued, "They will run tests. If there is nothing wrong with your heart, that is going to be an embarrassing conversation and an expensive ride." My father straightened up. The grimace vanished. He waved his hand at David. "Don't call." He snapped. It passed. It was just indigestion, stress. He sat back in his chair, adjusting his blazer. He glared at me. The miraculous recovery was complete. Leo looked at him, stunned. He slowly sat back down. He looked at me, and I saw the realization dawn on his face. They faked it. "Sit down." "Mom," I said. My mother sat. She was trembling, but it was rage now, not fear. "You are cold, Claire," she hissed. "You would have let him die. I would have called the professionals," I said, just like I called the professionals about the roof you never fixed. My father drank half his scotch in one swallow. "Fine," he said. "You want to play hardball? Let's play. You think that money was yours? That money was repayment. Claire, do you know how much it costs to raise a child in this country? $200,000, minimum, and that is before college. You lived in our house. You ate our food. You took vacations on our dime when you were a kid. You owe us. That money wasn't a gift. It was a reimbursement." I nodded. I had prepared for this argument. Page 4, I said. My father blinked. What? Look at page 4 of your packet, I said. He didn't move, so I recited it from memory. According to the USDA, the cost of raising a child born in 1994 was approximately $180,000, adjusted for inflation. However, that obligation is legal and moral. Parents do not invoice their children for existing. But let's assume your logic is valid. Let's assume I owed you for my childhood. I leaned forward. I have paid you $384,000. That covers my childhood. It covers the interest. It covers a phantom childhood for a sibling I don't have. Even by your own twisted transactional logic, the debt is paid. We are square. My father opened his mouth, but he had no numbers to throw back. He was used to emotional math, where we sacrificed equals infinity dollars. He wasn't ready for actual arithmetic. My mother jumped in. It is not about the math, she cried. Her eyes were wet with tears now. The weaponized tears I knew so well. It is about family. We are a team. We help each other. When you were sick in 3rd grade, who stayed up with you, me when you got your heart broken in college? Who did you call me? Does that mean nothing to you? It means everything. Mom, I said, that is why this hurts so much. Because you took that trust and you monetized it. You didn't call me because you missed me. You called me because you wanted a remodel. You didn't ask for help because you were drowning. You asked for help so you could go to a resort. I didn't, she sobbed. We never went to a resort. That is a lie. I reached for my phone. I have the recording. Mom, I said. The table went deadly quiet. What recording? She whispered. The voicemail Dad accidentally left me in 2021, I said. After he called begging for money for the legal fund, he forgot to hang up. I saw the color drain from my father's face. He remembered the call. He remembered the drive. I didn't play it loud. I didn't want the diners in the main room to hear. I just tapped the screen and slid the phone across the table to them. I played 10 seconds. She is so easy. That usually gets the checkbook open. Are we stopping at the breathless resort or the casino first? My mother stared at the phone. Her mouth opened and closed. There was no defense. It was her voice. It was her laugh. The laugh was the worst part. It was a mocking, cruel sound that stripped away 20 years of I love yous. Leo looked down at the table. He looked like he wanted to vanish. I took the phone back. I am not your pension plan. I said, I am not your retirement fund, and I am certainly not your ATM. My father looked at me. The bluster was gone. The fake heart attack was gone. He looked old, and for the first time, he looked scared, not because he was losing money, but because he was losing the audience. He looked at Leo, but Leo wouldn't meet his eyes. So that is it? My father asked. His voice was raspy. You are cutting us off. You are going to let us starve. You won't starve, I said. I checked your credit report. Dad, I know about the pension you actually have. I know about the Social Security. You have enough to live. You just don't have enough to live the way you want to live. I took a breath. This was the moment. The line. I am done funding the lie. I said, from this moment on, not one more cent leaves my account for you. If you have a medical emergency, call Medicare. If you have a house emergency, call insurance. If you call me asking for money, I will hang up. If you text me, I will block you. I looked at my mother, and if you try to shame me publicly, I added, if you tell Aunt Karen or the cousins that I'm unstable, or that I abandoned you, I will post the spreadsheet. I will post the voice note. I will sue you for fraud in civil court. I have the paperwork drafted. My mother recoiled. You wouldn't. Try me. I said. The room was silent. The air conditioner hummed. The ice in my tea glass shifted. They realized, in that moment, that the buttons were disconnected. They could press guilt. They could press panic. They could press duty. But nothing would happen. The machine was broken. My father stood up. He didn't look at me. He looked at the envelope on his plate. He picked it up. Come on. Linda, he said quietly. We are leaving. My mother stood up. She gathered her purse. She looked at me, and her face shifted one last time. The mask of the victim fell away, and the mask of the loving mother fell away. What was left was something hard, bitter, and entirely stranger. She leaned in. She didn't shout. She hissed. "You think you are so smart," she whispered. "You think you figured it all out with your little spreadsheet. Go ahead, keep your money. But you don't know the half of it. You don't know what we actually did for you. You don't know what we are protecting you from." She pulled back, her eyes glittering with a toxic secret. "What we will tell people is the least of your problems," she said. She turned and walked out. My father followed her. They didn't look back at Leo. They didn't pay for their drinks. The door clicked shut. I sat there. I felt the adrenaline crash. My hands started to shake. Leo looked up from the table. He looked shell-shocked. "Claire," he said, is all that true?" The recording, I nodded. "It is true. Leo." He put his head in his hands. "Jesus. I didn't know. I swear. I know." I said. I reached out and touched his arm. It wasn't a warm touch, but it wasn't hostile. It was a truce. David signaled the waiter. "Check, please." We walked out into the parking lot. The night air was cold. I took a deep breath, expecting to feel light, expecting to feel free. I felt relief. Yes, the bleeding had stopped. The accounts were closed. But my mother's whisper was still ringing in my ears. "You don't know what we are protecting you from." It was probably a lie. Another hook to drag me back in. But as I watched their taillights fade into the traffic, I realized that while I had won the battle for my finances, the war for my history wasn't over. There was one more layer to the rot, and I had the terrible feeling I was about to find it. The fallout arrived not like a storm, but like a virus. It started silently, transmitting from phone to phone, before the symptoms became visible. The morning after the dinner at the Ironwood, I woke up to a notification on my phone. It was from my cousin, Bethany, a woman I hadn't spoken to since Christmas. "I heard what happened. I am praying for your heart. Claire, you only get one set of parents." I stared at the screen. The manipulation was breathtaking in its speed. My parents hadn't wasted a second. They had left the restaurant, driven home, and immediately begun the work of spinning the narrative. They couldn't win on the facts, so they were fighting on the battleground of sentiment. I didn't reply to Bethany. I deleted the text. Then came the Facebook posts. My mother was a master of the vague book, the art of posting emotional, unspecified grievances, designed to solicit concern without providing details that could be fact-checked. It is the sharpest pain to pour your life into someone, only to be discarded when you are no longer useful. A mother's heart is a heavy burden today. 82 likes, 20 comments. Stay strong. Linda, we love you. Linda, children today just don't understand sacrifice. I sat at my kitchen island, drinking coffee, watching the comments roll in. David stood behind me, reading over my shoulder. His jaw was tight. "Let me reply." He said, "Let me post the spreadsheet. Let me post the photo of the espresso machine." "No," I said. "Why not? They are destroying your reputation. Claire, Bethany thinks you are a monster." "If I engage, I validate it," I said. "If I argue, it becomes a he said, she said. If I stay silent, it remains a tantrum. We are gray rocks. David, boring, unmovable, silent rocks. I held the line. When my Aunt Karen texted again, demanding to know why I was letting them starve, I sent a single, pre-written response. "Hi, Aunt Karen. Mom and Dad are not starving. They have a pension and Social Security. I have simply stopped providing extra funding for non-essentials. If they are telling you they are hungry, I can send you the number for the local food bank, or you are welcome to send them a check yourself." She didn't reply. That was the thing about the flying monkeys. They loved to lecture about generosity, but they rarely opened their own wallets. But while I was winning the emotional war by opting out, the dread from my mother's whisper at the restaurant was still itching at the back of my brain. "You don't know what we are protecting you from." I had assumed it was a vague threat about family secrets or genetic defects, but my mother wasn't a poet. She was a grifter. Her threats were usually tangible. On Tuesday, I decided to do a deep dive. I had already frozen my credit with the 3 major bureaus, but I hadn't looked at the soft inquiries, the ones that don't trigger a hard alert, but show who is peeking at your file. I pulled a full, comprehensive report from a paid service. I scrolled past the student loans I had paid off, past the car lease, past the mortgage. Then I saw it. Under the section for known addresses, there was a new entry, dated 3 months ago, 1402 Oak Street, Columbus, Ohio. My parents' address. I frowned. I hadn't lived there in 10 years. Why would that address be showing up as current? I scrolled down to the inquiry section. There was a query from Mid-State Lending Services. It was a mortgage originator. The date aligned perfectly with the foreclosure panic my father had tried to sell me. I called Mid-State Lending. I put on my project manager voice, crisp, authoritative, terrifying. "This is Claire Bennett," I said. "I am seeing an inquiry from your firm on my credit report. I did not apply for a loan with you. I need to know why you are accessing my file." The representative was hesitant. "I can't give out details on an application without verifying the borrower's identity. I am the subject of the inquiry." I said, "If you used my social security number, you have to tell me." "Well, ma'am, you are listed as a contributing household member on a loan modification application for a property at 1402 Oak Street." The air left the room. A contributing household member. It was a trick used to inflate household income. They hadn't forged my signature on a loan that would be a felony that was easy to prove. Instead, they had listed me as a resident, claimed my income contributed to the household expenses, and used my pay stubs, which I had foolishly emailed them years ago when I was applying for my first apartment and needed a guarantor to prove it. They were using my salary to qualify for a larger refinance on their house. If they defaulted on that modified loan, the bank wouldn't come after my money directly, but my name was tied to the asset. It created a link, a financial umbilical cord I thought I had cut, and worse, by listing me as a resident. They were potentially committing occupancy fraud. I thanked the representative and hung up. My mother hadn't been protecting me from a secret. She had been using me as a structural beam in their house of cards, and she was terrified that if I pulled away, the bank would realize the household income had just dropped by 6 figures. I called Sarah, my lawyer. "We are moving to phase 2. I said. I didn't feel sadness anymore. I felt a cold, mechanical precision. We drafted a formal cease and desist. It wasn't just a letter. It was a weapon. It demanded that they remove my name from any and all financial documents immediately. It stated that I did not reside at 1402 Oak Street. It stated that I provided no financial support to that household. And then, we sent a copy to Mid-State Lending. I was blowing up their refinance. I was sabotaging the loan they needed to keep their lifestyle afloat. It was the first time I had ever actively done something that would harm them. Rather than just refusing to help, it felt like surgery, necessary, bloody, and life-saving. 2 days later, the letter arrived at their house. I knew they got it because my father called me 14 times in 1 hour. I didn't answer. Then, the tactic changed. A text from my mother. "Claire, we need to talk. Not about money, about family. Please, just meet us for coffee. Halfway. We have someone who wants to help us mediate." Mediate. That sounded professional. That sounded rational. I showed the text to David. "Don't go," he said. "I have to." I said, "If I don't go, they will tell the family I refuse to even talk. I need to show that I'm reasonable. I will go, I will listen, and then I will leave." I drove to the halfway point, a diner off the interstate. I arrived 10 minutes early. I sat in a booth near the door, keeping my exit route clear. They walked in. They weren't alone. Walking behind them, clutching a leather-bound Bible, was Pastor Ellis. I knew Pastor Ellis. He was the minister at the church my parents attended sporadically, usually when they needed networking or community sympathy. He was a nice man, soft-spoken, who preached sermons about forgiveness and the prodigal son. My stomach turned. This wasn't mediation. This was an ambush. They slid into the booth opposite me. Pastor Ellis sat on the outside. "Hello? Claire?" Pastor Ellis said, smiling gently. "Your parents asked me to join us today. They are in a lot of pain." I looked at my parents. My mother was wearing no makeup, a calculated choice to look haggard and grief-stricken. My father was looking at his hands. "I didn't agree to this," I said, keeping my voice flat. "Claire, please," my mother whispered. "We just want to heal." Pastor Ellis opened his hands. "Claire, the Bible tells us to honor our father and mother. It doesn't say, honor them only when they are perfect. It is an unconditional command. Your parents feel that there has been a breach of spirit here. They feel abandoned." I looked at the pastor. I wondered if they had told him about the casino. I wondered if they had told him about the $384,000. "Pastor," I said, "did they tell you that I have given them nearly $400,000 over the last 10 years? Pastor Ellis blinked. He looked at my father. "Frank, it wasn't that much." My father muttered, "She is exaggerating. She is counting birthday gifts." I pulled the spreadsheet out of my bag. I always carried it now. It was my shield. "Here's the ledger. Pastor, every check, every transfer." I slid it across the table. Pastor Ellis looked down. He saw the numbers. He saw the categories. Transmission, roof, medical, legal. "I am not abandoning them." I continued. "I am stopping them from exploiting me. There is a difference between honor and enabling theft." My mother began to weep. Soft, pitiful sobs. "She is calling us thieves." "Pastor, after we gave her life, we are just struggling people trying to get by, and she is judging us from her high tower in the city." Pastor Ellis looked uncomfortable. He was prepared for a spiritual crisis, not a forensic audit. "Claire," he said, trying to regain control, "money is just worldly dust. Relationships are eternal. Can't we find a way to move past the ledger? Can't you find it in your heart to forgive the debt?" "As Christ forgives us," I stood up. "I can forgive the debt," I said, "and I have. I am not suing them for the money back, but I am not giving them another cent. And I am certainly not going to sit here and be lectured on morality by two people who committed mortgage fraud in my name last week." My father's head snapped up. I looked at him. I contacted the lender. "Dad, they know I don't live there. The refinance is dead." My father's face went purple. You called the bank, I called the fraud department." I said. The silence at the table was total. Pastor Ellis looked from my father's rage to my mother's terror. He realized, finally, that he had been brought into a gunfight armed with a hymnal. "I am leaving." I said, "Do not contact me again unless it is through my lawyer." I walked out. I didn't look back. But I heard my father start shouting. A raw, ugly sound that had nothing to do with heartbreak and everything to do with a con artist realizing the mark had woken up. I drove home. I felt shaking in my hands. But it wasn't fear. It was the adrenaline of severance. I was untethering. When I got home, Leo was sitting on the stoop of my apartment building. He had a backpack. He looked tired. "Hey," he said. "Hey." I said. I unlocked the door. "You want to come up?" He followed me up the stairs. He sat at the kitchen table while I made tea. "I saw Mom's post," he said, "and I saw your comment to Aunt Karen. And I did some math," he said. He pulled a crumpled piece of paper out of his pocket. I went through my Venmo, Claire, and my texts. He smoothed the paper out on the table. It was a list. Rent, car repairs, gear. "It adds up to about 40,000, he said, "over the last 5 years. That is what they gave me." He looked up at me. His eyes were red. "I didn't know it was yours," he said. "I mean, I knew they didn't have jobs that paid that well. But I told myself. I don't know what I told myself. I just took it." He pushed the paper toward me. "I can't pay you back 300 grand, he said. "But I can pay this back. The 40, not all at once. But I can do 500 a month. I am getting a steady gig teaching drums at the community center." I looked at the paper. It was a pathetic, messy, beautiful attempt at accountability. "I don't want your money." "Leo," I said, "take it. he said fiercely. Please, I need to pay it. If I don't pay it, I am just another part of the con. I don't want to be them. Claire. I looked at him. I saw the fear in his eyes, the fear of becoming our parents. It was a fear I shared. Okay, I said, 500 a month, into a separate account. We will use it for, I don't know, something real, maybe a real trip, not a fake one. Leo nodded. He wiped his nose with his sleeve. I told them, by the way, he said, I told them to leave you alone. I told them if they keep posting that trash about you, I'm going to comment on every single post with the truth. You did? Yeah, Mom blocked me. He managed a weak smile. I laughed. It was a dry, rusty sound, but it was a laugh. Welcome to the club. I said, the next month was the quietest month of my life. The 1st and the 15th passed without a transfer. I checked my bank account. The balance was higher than it had ever been. I didn't spend it. I just looked at it. It was a number. But it felt like oxygen. For the first time in 10 years, I slept through the night. I didn't wake up at 3 a.m. wondering if my parents had heat. I didn't flinch when my phone rang. The knot of anxiety that had lived in my solar plexus a constant, tightening screw was gone. I started to notice things I had ignored. The way the light hit the floorboards in the morning, the taste of my coffee, the fact that David had been carrying half the emotional load for years without complaint. I took David to dinner. We ordered the expensive wine. We toasted to silence, but the silence was the eye of the storm. I knew them too well to think they would fade away. Narcissists do not go quietly. They go nuclear. The final escalation arrived 3 weeks later. It came via certified mail, a thick envelope. I opened it at the kitchen counter. It was a letter from a lawyer, not a good lawyer. A strip mall lawyer whose letterhead looked like it was designed in Microsoft Word. Re Bennett versus Bennett demand for repayment and maintenance. Dear Ms. Bennett, we represent Frank and Linda Bennett. My clients assert that the sums provided by you over the past decade were not gifts, but part of a verbal contract for the care and maintenance of the family estate, in which you hold a beneficial interest. Furthermore, your sudden cessation of support has caused my clients undue financial distress and imminent risk of homelessness. We are preparing a civil suit for breach of verbal contract and elder neglect. To avoid litigation, my clients are willing to settle for a one-time payment of $50,000 and a reinstatement of the monthly stipend of $1,500. You have 48 hours to respond. I read it twice. It was desperate. It was legally laughable. Verbal contracts for family estate maintenance didn't exist in the way they claimed, and elder neglect wasn't applicable to a daughter refusing to pay for cable TV and vacations, but it was designed to terrify me. It was designed to make me think, oh God, a lawsuit, public court records, lawyers. It is easier to just pay the $50,000 and make it go away. That was their bet. They were betting on my fatigue. I handed the letter to David. They are suing me. I said, David read it. He snorted. They aren't suing you. Claire, they paid some guy $200 to write a scary letter. This is a shakedown. I know. I said, I looked at the deadline, 48 hours. If I ignored it, they might actually file something, just out of spite. If I fought it, I would be dragged into the mud. I realized then that this would never end as long as there was ambiguity. As long as they thought there was a 1% chance I would crack. They would keep hammering. They would send letters. They would call my boss. They would show up at my wedding. I needed to close the door, not just lock it, but brick it up. I sat down at my laptop. I didn't call Sarah. I didn't need legalese for this. I needed to speak directly to the human beings who had birthed me and then tried to consume me. I opened a blank document. I started to type. I wrote paragraphs explaining my feelings. I wrote about the betrayal. I wrote about the credit inquiry. I wrote about the voice note. Then I deleted it all. Explanations were fuel. Every word I gave them was something they could twist, argue with, or use to play the victim. Look how mean she is. Look how angry she is. I needed to be boring. I needed to be final. I needed one line. I thought about the years of transfers, the years of emergencies, The way they viewed me not as a person, but as a resource, a utility, like water or electricity. I wasn't their daughter, I was their wallet, and if I wasn't a wallet, I was nothing to them. I typed the sentence. It sat there on the white screen, black and stark. It wasn't cruel, it wasn't angry, it was just a statement of fact. A new law of physics for the Bennett family. I printed it, I signed it, I put it in an envelope addressed to the strip mall lawyer, and another copy addressed to 1402 Oak Street. I walked to the mailbox on the corner, the metal door clanged shut. I stood there for a moment, listening to the traffic. It was done. The old version of my family, the one where I paid for their love, was dead. I couldn't resurrect it. I turned and walked back toward my building. For the first time, I wasn't walking away from something. I was walking toward my own life. The location I chose was sterile, expensive, and legally binding. It was the conference room of Vance Associates, the law firm where my attorney, Sarah, was a senior partner. It was on the 42nd floor, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Chicago skyline. The table was a slab of mahogany long enough to land a plane on. The air conditioning was set to a brisk 68 degrees. I didn't want a family living room. I didn't want a restaurant where a public scene could be used as a weapon against me. I wanted a room where every word was recorded by a stenographer and where the presence of legal counsel would force my parents to strip away the emotional theatrics and deal with the raw, hard math. My parents had agreed to the meeting because they thought it was a settlement conference. Their strip mall lawyer, Mr. Henderson, had likely told them that I was scared, that the elder neglect threat had worked, and that I was coming to the table to cut a check. I sat on one side of the table. David was to my right, his hand resting on his knee, a silent anchor. Sarah sat to my left, organizing a stack of files with terrifying precision. At 10 o'clock, the door opened. My parents walked in. They were dressed for a funeral. My mother wore black, a cardigan pulled tight around her shoulders, her face scrubbed clean of makeup to highlight the dark circles under her eyes. My father wore a suit that was slightly too large, giving him a shrunken, frail appearance. They were playing the role of the discarded elders to perfection. Mr. Henderson followed them, looking around the opulent office with a mixture of nervousness and greed. He was out of his depth, and I think he knew it the moment he saw Sarah. My parents didn't look at me. They looked at the floor, performing shame. "Please, sit," Sarah said. They sat. The distance between us across the mahogany table felt like an ocean. "Mr. Henderson cleared his throat. He opened a thin folder. "Well," he began, his voice trying for authority but landing on shaky. "We are glad Ms. Bennett has come to her senses. My clients are heartbroken that it has come to this. Suing a child is a parent's worst nightmare, but they have to survive. We are prepared to accept the $50,000 settlement to drop the civil claims, provided the monthly stipend is reinstated immediately." He looked at me, expecting me to flinch, expecting me to pull out a checkbook. I looked at my father. He was staring at the window, refusing to meet my eyes. "There will be no settlement," I said. "Mr. Henderson blinked. "Excuse me. There is no check," I said. "There is no $50,000, and there is certainly no reinstatement of the stipend. Then why are we here, Mr. Henderson demanded, puffing up his chest. "If you are just here to insult my clients, we will see you in court. We have a verbal contract. We have a history of support that establishes a precedent of care. We are here," Sarah said, cutting in with a voice like a razor blade, "to give your clients one chance to walk away before we file criminal charges for fraud, identity theft, and extortion." The room went deadly silent. My mother's head snapped up. The frail old woman act vanished for a second, replaced by genuine shock. "Criminal charges," she squeaked. Sarah slid a heavy binder across the table. It made a thud that sounded like a gavel. "This is a forensic accounting of the last 10 years, Sarah said. "It details $384,250 in transfers from Claire to Frank and Linda Bennett." Mr. Henderson reached for the binder, but my father slammed his hand down on it. "We know the number," he shouted. We don't need a history lesson. It was family money. It was help. Since when is helping your parents a crime? Since the help was solicited under false pretenses. I said, I opened my own copy of the binder. I didn't look at the lawyer. I looked directly at my mother. Page 1. I said, January 14th, 6 years ago, you asked for $3,000 for a transmission rebuild. You said Dad couldn't get to work. You said you were desperate. I flipped the page. Here's the affidavit from Miller Automotive, stating the truck was never in the shop. And here's the credit card statement from the Breathless Resort in Punta Cana, showing a charge for $2,800 3 days later. My mother went pale. That is circumstantial. Mr. Henderson stammered, you can't prove page 10. I continued, my voice steady. July, 4 years ago. Dental surgery. $5,000. You sent me a photo of a swollen jaw. I looked at my mother. I found the photo online. Mom, it is a stock image from a medical textbook. I reverse image searched it. You didn't have surgery. You bought a hot tub. I have the delivery receipt from the pool supply company. My father stood up. He was shaking. It wasn't the fake shaking from the restaurant. It was the rage of a man being stripped naked in public. You ungrateful brat, he screamed. Who cares where the money went? We needed it. We raised you. We gave you life. You think you can sit there in your fancy suit and judge us? You owe us. Mr. Bennett, sit down, Sarah warned. I don't have to listen to this, my father yelled. He pointed a finger at me. You are selfish. You have always been selfish. You hoard your money while we struggle. You are cold. You are exactly like your grandmother. I let him scream. I let him vent the poison. I watched him reveal himself. The frail old man was gone. This was the bully I had lived with for 18 years. This was the man who used anger as a tool to pry open my wallet when guilt didn't work. When he finally stopped, panting, I turned the page. I am not done, I said. I pressed a button on the laptop in front of me. The voice note filled the room. The audio was crisp and clear. She is so easy. That usually gets the checkbook open. Are we stopping at the casino first, mister? Henderson looked at his clients. He looked at the recording. He looked back at his clients. He closed his folder. He realized, in that moment, that he wasn't representing victims. He was representing con artists, and he hadn't been paid enough to be an accomplice. That was a joke, my mother cried. Tears streaming down her face. A joke. Claire. We were just blowing off steam. Why are you doing this to us? Why do you hate us? I don't hate you. I said, I loved you. That is why this worked for so long. I closed the binder, but the lies about the money aren't why we are here today. I said, we are here because of the mortgage. The room temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. My father froze. He stopped panting. He sat down slowly. I pulled a single sheet of paper from a separate folder. Mid-state lending. I read, Loan modification application number 4599. Applicant Frank Bennett. Co-applicant Linda Bennett. Contributing household member Claire Bennett. I looked at them. You listed me as a resident. I said, you submitted my pay stubs, old ones you had on file, to inflate your household income. You used my credit worthiness to qualify for a loan you couldn't afford. That was a mistake, my father rasped. A paperwork error. The broker must have checked the wrong box. No, I said, I spoke to the broker. He said you explicitly told him I moved back in to help care for you. He said you provided the documents. I looked at Mr. Henderson. That is mortgage fraud. I said, it is a federal crime. It is also identity theft. And since the loan was processed across state lines, it is wire fraud. Mr. Henderson looked at my parents with horror. Is this true? He whispered. Did you put her name on the loan? My mother started to sob into her hands. We didn't mean to hurt her. We just needed to lower the payments. We were going to lose the house. So you decided to drag me down with you, I asked. You decided that if you were going to sink, you would tie an anchor around my ankle. I didn't list you as a borrower, my father argued, his voice thin and desperate. Just a household member. It doesn't hurt your credit. It ties me to your debt, I said. It exposes me to liability. And it proves, once and for all, that you don't see me as a daughter, you see me as collateral. I stood up. My parents looked up at me. They looked small. They looked pathetic. But I didn't feel the tug of pity anymore. I looked at them and I saw strangers who had been wearing masks of people I loved. "We are your parents." My father whispered. The fight had gone out of him. The evidence was too heavy. "We are your family. You can't put us in jail. You owe us that much." I took a breath. I looked at David, who gave me a small, barely perceptible nod. I looked at my father. "I don't owe you anything," I said. I leaned forward, placing my hands flat on the mahogany table. "I am not your daughter when you need a wallet," I said clearly, "so I am not your wallet anymore." The sentence hung in the air. It was short. It was final. It was the sound of a vault door slamming shut. "Mr. Henderson looked at Sarah. "What? What is the offer?" he asked weakly. To avoid the charges, Sarah slid a plain manila envelope across the table. It was thin. "There is no money in there," Sarah said. My father opened it. He pulled out a stack of brochures. There were pamphlets for debt consolidation counseling. There was a guide to downsizing real estate. There was a list of local food banks and senior employment programs. There was a printout of the application for legitimate government housing assistance. "These are your options," I said. "You have a pension. You have Social Security. You have a house you can sell to pay off your debts. You have resources. You just have to live within them." "You are cutting us off," my mother whispered. "Completely, I'm cutting off the money." I said, "I am cutting off the fraud. I am cutting off the lies." "But what about us?" she asked. "What about us?" I looked at her. I searched my heart for anger, for hate, for anything, but there was nothing. Just a vast, quiet plain of indifference. "That is up to you," I said, "but the relationship is bankrupt. You spent it all." I turned to Sarah. "If they contact me again for money, file the charges," I said. I turned to David. "Let's go." We walked to the door. "Claire," my father yelled. It was a last, desperate attempt to regain control. "If you walk out that door, you have no family. Do you hear me? You are an orphan. We will never speak to you again." I paused with my hand on the handle. I looked back. They were sitting at the massive table, surrounded by the evidence of their own greed, small and angry and alone. I realized he was threatening me with peace. He was threatening me with the very thing I had been paying $384,000 to try to buy. I accepted it. "Goodbye, Dad," I said. I opened the door and walked out. We walked down the long hallway to the elevator. My heels clicked on the marble floor. It was a sharp, rhythmic sound. We stepped into the elevator. The doors slid shut, sealing us in. I leaned back against the wall. I let out a breath that felt like it had been held in my lungs for 10 years. David looked at me. He didn't ask if I was okay. He knew. "You did it," he said softly. I looked at the floor indicator numbers counting down. 40, 39, 38. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel happy. I felt light. I thought about the money, the $384,000. It was gone. I would never get it back. It was the tuition I had paid for a degree in reality. But as the elevator hit the lobby and the doors opened to the bustling street, to the sunlight, to the rest of my life, I realized something. I hadn't walked out of there with a check. I hadn't walked out of there with an apology. I hadn't walked out of there with the parents I had always wanted, but I had walked out with Claire Bennett, and she was worth every penny. Thank you for listening to this story. It is a hard truth that sometimes the people who are supposed to protect us are the ones we need protection from. I hope Claire's journey gave you some strength today. I would love to know where you are listening from. Please leave a comment below with your country or city. And if you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to Revenge Stories for more tales of justice and turning the tables. Share your thoughts in the comments. Do you think Claire made the right choice? Until next time.